we? All right. Today we're going to get into something that could get a little bit controversial. We're going to start talking about some trauma dumping. Okay. What that means, how we could deal with it, kind of on both ends a little bit, but let's just talk about it. It's a term that's used to describe unsolicited, one-sided sharing of traumatic or intensely negative experiences or negative emotions, right? So trauma dumping, it can occur in inappropriate settings with people who are unprepared. You're catching them off guard for this interaction. Trauma dumping can make the person sharing feel relieved, but the receiver can feel frustrated. They could feel drained or taken advantage of because they never consented. Yep, there goes that word, consent. They never consented to receiving this information or helping you process this information, right? When and if we do it, we don't know if there's an existing trigger for this person. We don't know whether they are currently at capacity for managing whatever it is they have gone on in their lives, right? Before we share what we're sharing and add it on top of it, right? This trauma dumping can also indicate that we're having difficulty in processing or filtering and regulating our own emotions. So some people are not confrontational at all. And so it's hard for them to say no, and maybe they can't find the words to say, I don't understand the situation, or that it's fragile and sensitive. So they don't want to risk directly discussing their feelings or concerns if they feel like those feelings won't be received well, or it's going to damage the relationship in any way. Now, this can lead to actions like ghosting, people being estranged from each other, or just changes in the relationship that leave us feeling unsupported, right, for the person who's trying to share this information, and perhaps wondering, why the heck is our support not showing up? Why are they not here for me? We might even start wondering if the individual was even genuine or authentic in their concerns in their relationship and interactions with us at all. So trauma dumping, it can sort of ruin relationships. How does it ruin relationships? By making other people feel like they're overwhelmed, like they're helpless or frustrated because they're constantly hearing negativity or receiving graphic details from one source, right? We're not allowing the other person to share their own hardships. So there's not this reciprocation, their hardships or their feelings, and it creates this imbalance in the relationship. There's a space where accountability is not being taken for our own mistakes or actions, or being willing to find solutions to those things or problems. If you ever had a friend that keep coming to you with the same problem, you offer advice, but it's just over and over again, you might get frustrated. So we choose people who maybe they're not even able to support us properly, right? Maybe strangers or coworkers or acquaintances, and that's what we mean by it happening at inappropriate or inconvenient times. It's not the appropriate setting. So if we want to avoid trauma dumping, we can try to definitely seek professional help from a therapist or a counselor, or if you have experienced trauma or have any mental health imbalance or issues, we can ask for permission from someone before we start sharing our trauma or expressing negative emotions with someone, and give that opportunity to respect their boundaries. Because if they decline or need a break, we want to be respectful of that as well and be receptive to it. We want to be mindful of the timing and the setting and the context of our conversations, and try to avoid oversharing if we can, especially at inappropriate times or places, like on your first date. Hint, hint. Focus, or we could try to focus on one topic at a time. Try to avoid repeating the same story over and over, because that's definitely one sign of trauma dumping, and not reaching out, for support. Listen to the other person's feedback and perspective, and try to be open to constructive criticism or advice, even if you choose not to take ownership of that, right? We can express gratitude and be appreciative for the other person's support. Just a listening ear, or even if they do provide us any type of solutions, and the patience that they have for listening. It does affect both men and women, but there may be some differences in how that's experienced and how men and women both respond to it. Now, according to some of the sources, trauma dumping may look more like constantly interjecting or mentions of past trauma for men when they're having casual conversations. Men also tend to choose people who they feel who are more obligated to listen to them, maybe coworkers or close acquaintances. Sometimes men are oversharing graphic details of trauma as well. Very straightforward, okay? Whereas women have been known to share their stories repeatedly, telling that same story, right? Seeking sympathy or some type of preferential treatment from the listener, from the person that they're telling the information to, as more of an explanation, or posting detailed accounts of trauma on social media to a general audience, people that we don't even know, right? And I think both men and women do that. Now, there are some studies out there that suggest that men may drop out of trauma treatment more often than women, and that recovery rates are higher when it comes to women versus men because of that. However, gender differences are not actually consistent or conclusive, and it just may depend on the type of personality, and there's various factors. It could be just the timing for some people, the type of trauma for some people, the frequency and exposure of that trauma, the availability and the quality of the social support that is available at that time to that individual, and how that individual copes with things, right? And their level of resilience at the time. So if you or someone you know is struggling with trauma, it is important to seek professional help, okay, from a therapist or a counselor. I think it's time that we start to make that normal. Counselors can provide you with effective interventions. There's trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. There are eye movement desensitization therapies, reprocessing. There is, what is that called? Hypnotist, and to help heal from your trauma and prevent trauma dumping. And then as a receiver, even as a sharer, you want to set boundaries with someone who trauma dumps, okay? That's going to be crucial. It's crucial for your own mental health and the quality of your relationship with that individual. So how might you do that? How can you come up with something that's comfortable for the both of you? You can ask permission before listening to their trauma or emotions, and you can let them know if you are not in the right state of mind or the space, or maybe you feel uncomfortable with the situation or the setting to offer support at that time. So a good example would be like, you could say, I'm sorry that you're going through this, but I'm feeling a little stressed right now. Is it possible that we could talk about this later when I'm a little bit more calm or when I'm in a better space? Or you could say, I appreciate you trusting me with this information, but right now I'm at work or, busy with this, and I can't give you my full attention. Can you text me instead? Now, I snuck that in because I'm a texter. But you could set a time limit for the conversation as well. But you want to make sure that you stick to whatever you're doing. You could say, like, I have 15 minutes to talk, then I have to go for a meeting. Or I can listen until this time, but then I have to make dinner for my family or do this or do that. Whatever it is that you have to do, okay? And this can help you avoid feeling drained or resentful or fearful of losing the relationship or damaging it. But it also encourages the other person to be more concise about what they're sharing and focused, right? Definitely empathy is important, and we want to express empathy because that provides validation. But avoid giving advice or solving their problems sometimes as well, because that can be frustrating, right? Especially if you're hearing the story more than once. You could say, I hear that sounds really hard. Or, I'm sorry you had to go through that. You definitely didn't deserve it. This can show that you do care about what they're going through and you understand what they're communicating to you without taking on the responsibility of what's going on in their life or the burden of their trauma. Okay? Don't be afraid to encourage them to seek professional help as well if they need it and if it's outside of your scope, right? You can say, I'm glad you're sharing this with me, but I think you could benefit from talking to a therapist or a counselor. They have some skills and trainings to help you heal and cope better, more than what I may be able to provide. I'm here for you, but I'm not a professional. Sometimes you could be a professional, but you don't want to be your friend's professional. Okay, so you ask them, have you ever considered seeing someone who can offer you more guidance than what I can and, offer a different aspect of support? Definitely in all your communication, you want to be honest and you want to be respectful to this individual. It means everything, to keeping that relationship intact. And be honest about your own needs and your feelings. You can definitely let them know that you care about them, but you can also let them know that you're feeling overwhelmed by the sharing and the trauma that they're sharing with you. You can let them know that you need some space and you need to, take care of yourself for a moment. You let them know that you want to support them, but I'm also dealing with some issues of my own as well. So, if you can find space in your life to listen to me sometimes too, it would really be helpful. This can help you avoid a lot of resentment and a lot of burnout too. And also foster more of a balanced and reciprocal relationship because sometimes we have a friend and we think they're strong. And so because they're strong, they can handle anything, right? They don't need help with anything. So we want to give them that space. And setting boundaries is not something that's selfish. It's not something that's rude. It's definitely a way for us to protect our mental health and the other individuals and our well-being, right? So we want to show respect while we're doing it. We want to show that we definitely care for this person and we want our relationship to continue. But setting those boundaries helps us to avoid that trauma dumping on both receptive, right, the sharer and the receiver, and still foster healthier communication and relationships. Now, if we're not sharing our traumas, does that make us inauthentic? Not necessarily. You find those spaces where you feel most comfortable in trusting that information. I think that's important as well. And as long as you're being honest about that and you're finding those spaces, then let it ride how it rides. But don't be afraid that this is going to end your relationship. And maybe some people may need to take some space, right? Like, we're okay right now, I can't receive what you're saying. And that's okay to give them the space for that as well. It doesn't mean that setting those boundaries are wrong at all. So that's my little tidbit on trauma dumping. And definitely some of the information comes from experience, right? Definitely with helpers, if you're in the helping field, it could be overwhelming because you're spending all day at a practice or at work or whatnot. And so when you're with your friends, maybe that's your space for outlet and you don't want to be the professional to your friend. You got to be honest about that too and know where your boundaries lie. So don't feel bad. It's going to be okay. You can work it out.